The order was for orchids, but it came with blood. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Comment your city. I love hearing them. Wolfe smells deceit in bloom. If you've ever tried to interrupt Nero Wolfe during the sacred hours between 9 and 11 in the morning, those being the hours he tends to his orchids, you'd understand why I consider what happened that Tuesday an act of high treason. I'd sooner have poked a sleeping lion with a typewriter ribbon than buzzed the plant rooms without just cause. But just cause arrived, or so I thought, when the doorbell rang and the voice on the intercom belonged to Theodore Horstman. And not from upstairs, mind you. From the stoop. "Archie," he said, tight and nasal as ever. "Open the door, quickly." That quickly got my attention. Theodore doesn't do quickly. He's as steady as Wolfe's morning beer. So I hit the release and met him in the vestibule, where he stood clutching a brown-wrapped box like it was radioactive. "Someone delivered this," he said. His eyes were pale and annoyed behind those wire frames. Addressed to Mr. Wolfe. No return. Smells wrong. Now, I've had packages come through the door that smelled like cheap perfume, gun oil, and, on one memorable occasion, a certain brand of trout bait. But this one? It did smell wrong. Not dangerous, exactly. Just off, like a florist's mistake. "What's the label say?" I asked. "For the Master of Orchids," he read. "No sender. The handwriting's elegant. And there's this." He handed me a small white envelope tucked under the twine. I turned it over. Thick paper, the kind that costs $1 a sheet, sealed with dark green wax. The impression was of a single word, pressed deep. Aurelia. I'll admit that raised my eyebrows. Aurelia isn't the kind of name you forget. I'd heard it once before. From Wolfe himself, years ago, when he'd been speaking of orchids with that soft reverence usually reserved for saints or sauces. Paphiopedilum aurelia, a golden hybrid he'd pursued and lost in some messy quarrel with an eccentric grower upstate. "The devil," I muttered. "All right, Theodore. Up you go. Present it to him yourself." His jaw stiffened. "You know the rule. No one disturbs him during—" I cut him off. "This isn't a social call. It's botanical destiny." He glared, but his feet started toward the stairs anyway. I followed, because curiosity's my worst habit after women and sarcasm. We reached the plant rooms, a jungle of glass, heat and damp air that always made me feel like I'd stepped into the lungs of the tropics. Wolfe stood among his orchids, hands behind his back, eyes half-lidded. He didn't turn. "Theodore," he said, "you know better than to—" "Mr. Wolfe," Theodore interrupted, which by itself was grounds for excommunication. "A delivery. Unusual." That got him. Wolfe pivoted slowly like a planet turning. His eyes found the box. "Unwrap it," he said. Theodore did, carefully. Out came a wooden case lined with moss and wax paper. Inside lay a single orchid, gold and cream, petals curved like whispers. Even I could tell it was extraordinary. Wolfe's lips parted slightly. "Paphiopedilum aurelia," he murmured. "Impossible." He leaned closer, not touching. His eyes, black, heavy, alive, studied it the way other men study a beautiful woman they know they can't trust. Then he straightened. "Who delivered it?" "No one," I said. "Left at the door. Box and letter." "Letter." I handed it over. He broke the seal and read in silence. The only sound was the hiss of the misting nozzles. After a long minute, he folded the note and looked at me. "Archie," he said, "you will find the messenger who brought this." "Sure," I said. "Any reason why?" "Yes." His gaze dropped back to the flower. "Because the sender claims to have murdered for it." I won't say the words made me cold, but they did rearrange a few vertebrae. Wolfe slid the note to me with 2 fingers, as if it might stain. It read like a valentine from a misanthrope. master of orchids. You once desired what others would only display. I have obtained it. I could not let it be wasted by a fool with clean hands. Accept this gift, and you will help me. Come noon, your house will be visited by people who think they know what I did. They will lie. You will not. Aurelia's patron. The devil indeed, I said, and handed it back. So our patron murdered for a flower and wants absolution with lunch. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. He or she wants verification, not absolution. The letter depends on my distaste for error. And my appetite for exercise. I pointed at the box. If I'm to find who rang the bell and fled, I'll start with a building that sees more packages than a Santa warehouse. How much time does noon give me? He checked his watch. 11:08. Less than an hour. Use it. Fritz? Fritz appeared, as he always does, on the exact border between silent and sudden. Wolfe told him to take the plant to the south bench and not to let Theodore die of anxiety. Then he told me to fetch the hall book. My invention, not his. I keep a log of who rings, when, and why, because I prefer memory to be corroborated. We didn't have much. At 9:53, Theodore had heard the bell, descended, and discovered the box alone on the stoop. A taxi had pulled away from the fire plug, but New York doesn't issue medals for noticing taxis. I phoned the drugstore on the corner for a shot at the cab stand's memory. The pharmacist remembered a courier in a green windbreaker grabbing a soda at 9:30, but the cabbie, who was always leaning on the paper rack, wasn't there. That left Gus the doorman 2 doors down. He spends his mornings guarding a building that doesn't need guarding and watching hours as a hobby. Gus said sure, he'd seen a man with long arms, like a spider that got a decent job, set down a parcel, and leave without knocking. Cap pulled low, face a blur, the way New York faces are when you don't care. He had a limp. Left leg. That wasn't nothing, but it wasn't a summons either. Back upstairs, Wolfe had moved from greenhouse to office, which is like moving from altar to nave. He'd settled into the yellow chair behind his desk. The box, now empty, was on the red leather, and the note lay to his right, under a paperweight shaped like a black egg. He was regarding neither, which meant he was regarding both. You will not find our courier in the time allotted, he said when I came in. Postures, disguises, and Manhattan all conspire against you. Instead, we will let our noon visitors tell us what they came to say. Open the front door. Open it? You planning to welcome a parade? No, he said. I'm planning to be prepared for it, and Archie... He indicated the note. Do not mention murder again until I do. Words are solvents. That's Wolfe for you. He won't budge for a fire inspector, but he'll oil his sentences. I unlocked the front door, but left the chain. Then I returned to the office and took my perch at the corner of his desk, where I could watch the hall, and Wolfe could pretend I wasn't leaning on his empire. The orchids upstairs hissed on their own schedule. Down here, the radiator ticked like a low-grade conscience. At 11:41, the bell rang. I went to the door, looked through, and saw a woman I'd call composed if I had never seen fear before. Early 30s, clean dark bob, gray suit that said lawyer or anyone who wants to be mistaken for one, and a mouth that had learned to hold back. I opened. Good morning. We're accepting visitors today, coincidentally. I have an appointment. She said it crisp, as if saying it could make it true. With Mr. Wolfe. You and half the block. Name? Camilla Reeve. It hit like a memory you don't want. A year ago, I'd seen that name in the ledger under New Partnerships. She'd joined the gallery firm of Hargrove and Styles, a crucible for wealthy amateurs to have taste professionally installed. Come in, Miss Reeve. I led her to the office. Wolfe didn't rise. He has that rule posted internally. But his head inclined a degree. She stopped 3 feet from his desk like she'd found an invisible rope. I took her coat and got nothing from the pockets except lint and the smell of decent soap. She went first. Mr. Wolfe, please, may I see it? You may not, Wolfe said. You may explain your presence. She looked at me, then back. A plant was delivered here this morning. A very specific plant. The world is large, Miss Reeve, Wolfe said. If you intend to contract my services, do so. If you intend to elicit information without contracting them, you will fail. She pressed her lips together. Then, yes, I wish to engage you. Someone has stolen a Paphiopedilum hybrid from my employer's collection. He calls it Aurelia. Calls it is apt, Wolfe said. Names flatter ambitions. He tapped the black egg. Your employer? Mr. Bertram Hargrove. So there we were. A golden shoe dropped, if not the whole foot. Hargrove, the patron saint of the wealthy curious. He liked to hang money on walls and petals and to ask the world to clap. What is your function, Miss Reeve? Wolfe asked. General counsel to the gallery. I also coordinate acquisitions. And this theft, Wolfe murmured, occurred when? Last night, sometime after 9. The building has alarms. Nothing triggered. The greenhouse door was locked from the inside this morning. The plant was simply gone. Simply, he repeated. And how did you intend to proceed without me? By begging you anyway, she said, surprising herself maybe. Mr. Hargrove wants it recovered quietly. She stopped, and the pause wasn't legal. He what? I asked. He is hosting a private showing tonight. 2 donors from Zurich. The hybrid was to be a centerpiece. He's offering $25,000 for its return. He asked me to... Her eyes flicked toward the hall as the bell rang again. To find anyone who could help. Mr. Wolfe, please, if you have any lead... Pfui, Wolfe said, but without heat. Archie. I went to the door. This time it was a man who'd shaved either too well or not at all. Late 40s, tall, one shoulder a shade lower than the other. The spider with a day job. Though he didn't limp. He held a hat he didn't like wearing and a temper he liked even less. Mr. Wolfe, he grated before I fully cleared the jam. Name's Victor Stiles. I'm here about Hargrove's flower. He pushed past "may I" like it was a turnstile. In the office, he stopped dead at sight of Camilla Reeve. The air did something between them, less welcome than recognition and more complex than dislike. Victor, she said low. You shouldn't? I should, he shot back, then saw Wolfe and recalibrated. Mr. Wolfe, I want it on record that Hargrove is a thief. That plant was bred by my brother, Colin Stiles. Bertram stole the credit and now pretends it was stolen from him. Wolfe steepled his fingers. You accuse your client of chicanery, Miss Reeve, he said without looking at her. Mr. Stiles accuses him of larceny. You have selected me for a very busy noon. The bell again. I didn't sigh out loud because I'm a gentleman. On the stoop stood a man with the wrong haircut for his skull and a tie that had lost a fight with his collar. He had the wary eyes of a cop who'd traded his badge for a security badge. Goodwin, he said, like we were neighbors who borrowed trouble and sugar from each other. Eli Cohane. I watch Hargrove's building at night. I need to talk to Wolfe. Pronto. Pronto is a language we don't speak, I said, but let him in. By the time we reached the office, Wolfe's eyebrows had agreed to meet in the middle. He surveyed the trio and nodded at a chair for each. None of them sat. The room was getting that charge you feel before a storm, all the air deciding what to do. Speak, he told Cohane. Someone was inside after close, Cohane said. I did my rounds at 10:30. Fine. At 11 I hear a soft thud in the south corridor. I go. Nothing. But the window vent in the greenhouse was cracked just a sliver, and there was condensation on the sill like a breath had leaned there. In the morning, the plant's gone. Now Hargrove screaming, Reeve here is calling me negligent, and Stiles, he jabbed a finger, is threatening to bring the cops. I came to you because Hargrove said you could keep this quiet. Also because I have a wife who loves rent. Wolfe closed his eyes, which for him is a kind of standing ovation to thought. When he opened them, they were heavy. "You're all here," he said, "because a thief wants me to validate him. Or her. You will not leave this house until I am satisfied I know too little to be useful or enough to be just. Archie, call Saul Panzer and tell him to be available. Fritz, coffee, and Miss Reeve. Hargrove calls, inform him he has retained me at my customary rate. She blinked. He hasn't. He has, Wolfe said, by sending you, by needing me, and by the fact that Aurelia has already crossed my threshold. He inclined his head toward the hallway, toward the stairs, toward the plant I wasn't going to show them. We begin now. If you've ever seen Wolfe settle in for what he calls the sorting of threads, you'd know why I keep aspirin in the second drawer. The man doesn't move, doesn't blink, and doesn't acknowledge human respiration. It's like watching a volcano pretending to be extinct. He sat there now, behind the desk, his eyes half closed, with Camilla Reeve, Victor Stiles, and Eli Cohane, each holding their own brand of discomfort. The air in the office was heavy enough to slice. Fritz came in with the coffee service. 3 cups for them, 1 for me, none for Wolfe. He drinks beer at noon and coffee only when civilization collapses. When Fritz left, Wolfe spoke. "Miss Reeve, you will start. Please recite every event from the time you last saw the orchid to the time you discovered its absence." Camilla took a breath that looked expensive. "Last night we hosted a small preview dinner. Mr. Hargrove was entertaining 2 donors from the Foundation for Botanical Heritage. They wanted to see the collection before tonight's showing. I left the gallery at 9:15. The greenhouse was locked, the alarm set. Only Mr. Hargrove and Mr. Cohane remained in the building. Wolfe didn't move. And this morning, at 8, I arrived early. The alarms registered undisturbed, but the plant was missing. One of the glass panes on the south vent was loose. I found the clasp bent from the inside." "Inside," Wolfe repeated softly. "Not outside." "Yes." He nodded once. "Mr. Cohane." Cohane straightened. "She's right about the timeline. I did my check-in at 10:30. The greenhouse looked fine then. At 11 I heard that noise, like I said. Soft thud, metal tapping. Could have been the pipes. When I checked, everything was quiet. I didn't see a thing. No sign of a break-in." "Your rounds are recorded?" Wolfe asked. "Yeah, punch clock system, electronic log." "Then I will need access." Cohane hesitated. "Hargrove might not like..." "Pfui. Hargrove's preferences are irrelevant to fact. Mr. Stiles." Victor Stiles' jaw was already set to combat. "My brother Colin hybridized that plant 3 years ago. He presented it to Hargrove on agreement it would be shown under his name. Hargrove used it to secure investors, and when Colin pressed for public credit, Hargrove cut him off, barred him from the greenhouse. My brother's been fighting to prove ownership since." "And your brother?" Wolfe asked. "Dead," Stiles said. 6 months ago, accident. Car went off a service road near Hudson Falls. The plant vanished from his private records after that." "Ah," Wolfe murmured. "So Hargrove possessed it by survivorship of theft." Stiles' voice sharpened. "You could put it that way." Wolfe closed his eyes again. "And you, Mr. Stiles, appeared here because you received the same letter?" "What letter?" He opened one eye. "The one that accompanied the delivery. It promised my involvement. It implied murder." Stiles blinked. "I didn't get any letter. I only came because Camilla called me. Said she was coming to see you." Camilla turned, startled. "I didn't call you." "Yes, you did," he snapped. 9:30 this morning. Your number came up on my phone." She looked genuinely confused. "That's impossible. I was with Hargrove until 10. My phone was in my purse." Wolfe opened both eyes. "Miss Reeve, what sort of phone do you possess?" "A standard smartphone." "Was it unattended?" "For a few minutes, yes." "Then we have a usurped invitation." Wolfe said. Someone wished Mr. Styles to join you here, and someone wished all three of you to converge. He leaned back, folding his hands over the dome of his stomach. Archie. Yes, sir. You will call Saul. Tell him to find out whether a courier service delivered a parcel to this address between 9 and 10 this morning. If so, obtain the name used and the originating pickup location. Also, ascertain the number used to contact Mr. Styles. I suspect it will not trace to Miss Reeve. On it, I said, and crossed to the phone. Saul Panzer doesn't need instructions twice. He eats logistics for breakfast. While I was dialing, Wolfe continued his leisurely dissection. Miss Reeve, Mr. Styles, and Mr. Cohane. Each of you will remain in New York until I authorize otherwise. You will inform no one that the plant has reached me. To do so would invite complications that would bore me intolerably. Camilla opened her mouth, closed it again. Wolfe had that effect. Now, he said, the description of the theft implies a person intimate with the building and its security. That implicates you, Mr. Cohane. Cohane bristled. Hey now. Calm, Wolfe said. It also implicates Mr. Hargrove. Or someone acting for him. The pattern is clear. A locked room, a vanished object, and a subsequent orchestration to deliver it here. Only one conclusion fits so far. Someone wishes me to authenticate guilt. Whether as witness or accessory remains to be seen. Saul answered on the line. I relayed the details. He grunted once and hung up. Efficiency in human form. When I turned back, Camilla was standing rigid, her hands clasped tight enough to whiten the knuckles. Mr. Wolfe, she said, what do you intend to do? Think, he said, and eat. That's Wolfe for you. Faced with a tangle of motives and deceit, his first move is lunch. Fritz, sensing the tide, appeared to announce that cold beef, mushroom pâté, and salad awaited. Wolfe stood, a monumental effort, and inclined his head. You will all remain available for my further questions, he said. Archie will escort you out. Once they were gone and the door closed, Wolfe turned to me. We have our storm, Archie. It will now choose a lightning point. Which means? It means, he said, easing into his chair again, that the letter was bait. Not for the police, not for Hargrove, for me. Someone requires validation of an act they can no longer control. That is why the orchid was sent to me. Proof of possession, proof of intellect, perhaps proof of guilt. Sounds like our mysterious senders got style. Style without proportion, Wolfe said, is chaos. I detest chaos. When Saul reports, we shall restore order. At that precise moment, the phone rang again. I picked it up. Saul's voice was flat, efficient. Courier was private. Paid cash at a storefront near Madison and 73rd. Name used was Bertram Hargrove. The pickup time was 9:12. I thanked him and hung up. Well, Wolfe asked. Hargrove himself arranged delivery. Wolfe's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something older and colder. So the thief delivers his own theft and invokes my judgment. Conceit, Archie. The most expensive of human indulgences. He leaned back, closed his eyes again, and murmured, Prepare yourself. By nightfall we will receive another visit, this time from the man who believes he can direct me. Bertram Hargrove, I said. Undoubtedly. And if he's the killer? Then, Wolfe said, reaching for his beer, he will find that truth, unlike orchids, cannot be cultivated. If Wolfe ever said, prepare yourself, I knew better than to expect an afternoon nap. By 3 o'clock, he'd spent 2 full hours in what he calls rumination, which looks to the untrained eye like sleep but isn't. The only sign of life was the slight tap of his index finger on the arm of his chair, keeping some private rhythm with thought. I'd made myself useful by filing the morning's notes, calling Saul twice for updates, and intercepting one call from Camilla Reeve, who wanted to clarify a few details. I told her politely to keep her details where they were until Wolfe gave her an appointment. Then I spent 20 minutes reading the late edition, which had an item buried in the culture section about an unforeseen postponement of the Hargrove Gallery's private showing that evening. That told me Hargrove was already sweating. At 3:15, Fritz brought beer. Wolfe opened his eyes, drank half a glass in silence, and said, "Archie, inform me." Saul checked the courier shop again. No cameras inside, but there's one pointed at the curb from a dry cleaner across the street. He's pulling footage. Says he saw a man fitting Hargrove's build, tall, trim, silver hair, signing for the parcel at 9:12. Hat brim low, but it's him. Wolfe nodded slightly, not surprised. Conceit confirmed. He paid cash, I added. Used no car, likely walked the block. Of course, he would not risk traceable convenience. The phone rang, saving me from another round of deductive scripture. I picked it up. The voice was masculine, cultured, and shaking only on the edges. "This is Bertram Hargrove, Mr. Goodwin." "You've got him." "I must speak to Mr. Wolfe immediately." "I'll see if he's receiving penitence." "Please tell him I didn't send that letter, or the orchid. Someone is trying to ruin me." I covered the mouthpiece. "It's him," I said. Wolfe gestured with 2 fingers, the royal signal for admission. "Hargrove," I told the line. "Mr. Wolfe is listening." A pause. Then that kind of careful tone people use when they're afraid of sounding guilty. "Mr. Wolfe, I implore you, whatever was delivered to your address this morning was done without my knowledge. That orchid is mine, yes, but I never authorized its removal from the gallery." "Yet it was delivered in your name," Wolfe said, "by a courier paid in cash, at 9:12 this morning." Good God, someone's framing me. You must see that." "Not yet. I see only that you had motive and opportunity. You will come here at 6. 6? Can't we?" "No," Wolfe said, and hung up. I replaced the receiver and gave him a look. "You're laying bait," he grunted. "He will come. He is too frightened not to. A man defending reputation over truth is always punctual." That was that. At 6 sharp, the bell rang again. I went to the door and found Hargrove exactly as described in the magazines, tall, polished, and wearing a gray suit with more structure than a courthouse. His hair was silver in a deliberate way, not the accidental kind, and his face had that cultivated calm rich men wear when they've practiced it in mirrors. Inside the office, Wolfe didn't rise. Hargrove hesitated, then inclined his head as if they were both judges in different jurisdictions. "Mr. Wolfe," he began, "I came at once because the situation is intolerable. My reputation, my gallery, my name." "Spare me," Wolfe said mildly. "You're here because the alternative was worse." "Sit." Hargrove sat. I took my post on the corner of the desk, notepad open. "Now," Wolfe said, "the orchid known as Paphiopedilum aurelia. You claim ownership?" "Yes." "And its provenance?" "Bred by the late Colin Stiles under my commission. I financed his work, housed his hybrids, provided him every resource. The plant was mine by contract." "Was there such a contract?" "Yes, of course. Miss Reeve can produce it." "Then you should have done so already," Wolfe said. "Yet she did not mention it." "Why?" Hargrove's eyes tightened. "She's young, nervous. Perhaps she... Pfui. She is neither young enough nor foolish enough to omit a document that would clear you. I suspect she's not aware such a contract exists. Does it?" For a second, Hargrove didn't answer. Then, "It did. But Stiles destroyed his copy before his death. Mine was lost in a fire last year." Wolfe gave him a look that could curdle honey. "Convenient combustion. Very well. You deny sending the orchid?" "I do." "You deny authoring the accompanying note?" "What note?" I handed it over. He read, lips tightening. "This is absurd. I've never seen this before." "Of course you haven't," Wolfe said. The author intended that you would not. But tell me, why would anyone go to such lengths to place your property here under false pretenses? Hargrove swallowed. To ruin me. The gallery's finances are strained. A scandal, any hint of impropriety, could destroy investor confidence. There are people who would like that very much. Name one. Victor Stiles. That brought my eyebrows up. Brother of the deceased? Exactly. He's been threatening me for months, claiming I cheated Colin. He wants what he calls restitution. And you refused, Wolfe said. Of course. Wolfe nodded once. Miss Reeve? Hargrove hesitated. She's loyal, but emotional. If she believed Victor's story, she might, well, she's close to him. They were once involved. That was new. You're sure? I asked. I'm not blind, Mr. Goodwin. Wolfe drew a slow breath, then said, Mr. Hargrove, you may consider yourself free for the moment. You will remain reachable by telephone. Archie, accompany him to the door. In the hall, Hargrove paused. Mr. Goodwin, tell your employer, please, that I didn't kill anyone. Colin's death was an accident. The police confirmed that. I met his eyes. Sure, but accidents can be arranged. He didn't like that. The mask cracked just for a heartbeat, and something raw looked out before he turned and left. Back in the office, Wolfe had returned to his chair. Well, he said. Well, he's sweating, and if lying were a calorie-burning exercise, he'd be thin. Indeed, Wolfe said, but not guilty yet. The letter's author still eludes us, and so does the purpose of this melodrama. He reached for his beer, considered, and set it down untouched. Archie, fetch Miss Reeve. I wish to test a theory before dinner. I started for the phone, but it rang first. I picked it up and froze. The voice was breathless, trembling, unmistakable. Camilla Reeve. Mr. Goodwin, she whispered, tell Mr. Wolfe. Don't let Hargrove leave the city. Please, I found something. Colin's real notes. They prove Hargrove forged the hybrid. Where are you? At the gallery, but someone's been here. The office is... A crash, a gasp. The line went dead. I turned toward Wolfe. His eyes were already open, dark and knowing. Archie, he said, low and calm, get your coat. I'm gone, I said, and was. I was out the door before Wolfe could tell me to avoid getting blood on my shoes. The November air slapped me in the face as I hit the stoop, and I didn't waste seconds debating taxis versus our sedan. I took the roadster, made the turn onto Madison in a screech that earned me a disapproving wave from a doorman, and pointed downtown toward the gallery. Camilla Reeve hadn't struck me as the fainting kind. For her to sound like that on the phone meant whatever she'd found was more than paper. It was dynamite. The Hargrove Gallery sits in one of those narrow mid-block brownstones the city loves to rent to the cultured. By the time I pulled up, the street was almost empty except for a newsboy and a delivery van idling with no driver. I didn't like that van. It looked too still, like it was watching. The gallery door was unlocked, which narrowed the odds in favor of trouble. Inside, the air smelled of polish and panic. The lights were still on, but half the sconces flickered, throwing jumpy shadows on the paintings. I called her name once. Nothing. Then twice, louder. The only answer was the faint creak of wood from the greenhouse wing. I moved quietly, hand ready, shoes soft. In the greenhouse, the air turned thick and wet. Rows of orchids stood like silent jurors, faces pale under the lamps. At the far end, a glass case lay, shattered, shards glittering like ice. And beside it, on the tile, Camilla Reeve sat propped against a bench, pale and dazed. Archie, she said weakly. I got to her fast. Don't move, you hurt? She shook her head, though her hand was bleeding from a shallow cut. Someone was here. They were looking for the notebook. I heard them in the office, then they must have seen me. See who? I I only saw the back of them. A man, medium height, coat with a high collar. They pushed me, grabbed the papers, and ran out through the side exit. The door she meant was half open, its lock forced from the inside. The delivery van was gone. I called it into Wolfe before she could talk herself into fainting. "She's alive," I told him. Somebody ransacked the gallery, took what she called Colin Styles's notes, and left by car. Wolfe's voice was even, which meant his brain was running hot. "Stay there. The police will come." "The police?" "Yes. I will require them for context. Do not allow them to detain you beyond necessity. Bring Miss Reeve back when possible." By the time the squad car arrived, Camilla had recovered enough composure to supply the edited version. She'd found the office broken into and been attacked. I backed her up with enough detail to make it sound dull. The officers weren't thrilled, but Wolfe's name carries a certain bureaucratic spell. They made their notes and let me escort her out after a short statement. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, wearing that look of distant satisfaction he reserves for when the world starts proving him right. Fritz had tea waiting, though I poured something stronger for Camilla. She sipped once, both hands shaking. "They're gone, Mr. Wolfe. The notes, Colin's handwriting, everything. It proved Hargrove lied about the hybrid. It showed the parent plants came from a private collection in Italy. Not his." "And these papers were where?" Wolfe asked. "In a locked drawer in the office. I found the key taped under the desk. Colin must have hidden it before he died." "Curious," Wolfe said softly. "You said earlier you were unaware of any contract between Mr. Hargrove and your late associate. Did these notes contain one?" "No, just breeding records. But if Colin kept them, he must have known they'd expose the fraud." "Fraud," Wolfe repeated. "A convenient word that avoids the uglier one. Theft, of labor, of reputation, and now, possibly of life." She looked up sharply. "You mean Colin's accident?" "Perhaps not an accident at all," Wolfe said. If Hargrove feared exposure, the solution was expedient, and now, to erase the residue, someone removes the proof. It is consistent. I said, "That still leaves the letter and the delivery. Hargrove's too vain to orchestrate his own downfall." Wolfe's eyelids drooped. "Indeed. Someone else uses his vanity as lever, someone intimate with both him and the Styles brothers. Miss Reeve, your acquaintance with Victor Styles is more than professional." Color rose in her face. "We were close once. It ended when Colin died. Victor blamed me. Said I'd taken Hargrove's side. Ah, so Victor might regard you as both traitor and witness." She pressed her lips together. "He wouldn't hurt me." Wolfe opened one eye. "Miss Reeve, when emotion enters the room, reason leaves by the window. Your faith, while touching, is irrelevant." The phone rang again. I picked it up. Saul's voice. "Got something. The van that left Madison and 73rd around 9:15 this morning, same model spotted an hour ago near Hargrove's gallery, registered to a Victor Styles." I whistled softly. "That's tidy." "Plate traced through a private lease," Saul continued. "He returned it at 4:30. Clerk says he looked nervous, had a scratch on his cheek." "Thanks, Saul. You're on retainer until Wolfe says otherwise." When I hung up, Wolfe already knew. Victor Styles drove the courier van. Predictable. The simplest route between indignation and action is self-justification. Camilla stared at us both. "You think Victor stole the orchid?" "Not precisely," Wolfe said. "He delivered it. To me, under Hargrove's name, to force confrontation. But something altered the scheme. Someone else interfered, and now your discovery has added instability. It may force him to rashness." I asked, "So what's our next move?" He looked at me like I'd asked whether water was wet. "We wait. Mr. Styles will come. When a man arranges a trap and the prey refuses to step inside, he grows impatient and enters it himself." Camilla's voice trembled. If Victor comes here, Wolfe interrupted gently, you will remain. He will find courage in your presence. Archie, ensure the front door is secure but unbarred. When Mr. Styles arrives, you will show him in. Any idea when? Before midnight, Wolfe said, and his tone made it prophecy. He will not sleep with doubt unconfirmed. And when he comes, he will tell us whether murder blooms only in soil or also in conscience. Camilla shivered. Outside, the city hummed in its ordinary key, but inside the brownstone the air had changed again, thick with waiting. Wolfe closed his eyes, hands folded, already in that stillness he calls contemplation, and I call baiting the hook. I sat near the door, Colt in reach, and thought about orchids, how beautiful things grow best on decay. By 9 that night, the brownstone had settled into a kind of taut stillness. Fritz had cleared the dinner dishes and vanished with the quiet tact of a man who's seen too many guests arrive after dessert with murder on their minds. Wolfe had returned to his chair, his hands resting on the arms like punctuation marks, to a thought he hadn't spoken yet. Camilla. Reeve sat opposite him, pale and drawn, her eyes darting from the door to the window as if she half expected Victor Styles to materialize in the parlor by osmosis. I kept my post near the office door, half listening to the city traffic outside and half watching Wolfe watch nothing. When the man's silent, you can almost hear him rearranging other people's mistakes. At 9:15, the phone rang. Wolfe gestured, and I picked up. Saul's voice came through low and crisp. He's moving. Styles left his apartment half an hour ago. Took a cab heading your way. Armed. Didn't see, but his jacket's hanging heavy on one side. I'd bet your pay stub he's got something in it. That's generous of you. Keep shadowing in case he detours. I hung up and turned to Wolfe. He's coming. Wolfe opened one eye. Of course. Saul thinks he's carrying. He won't use it here. Because you're that terrifying. Because he's that theatrical. He will need an audience for what he believes is revelation. Camilla made a small sound. Mr. Wolfe, please. If Victor's armed, this could be dangerous. He regarded her with mild displeasure. Miss Reeve, your concern is misplaced. He will not shoot me. I represent the only mind willing to understand him. Sit still and do not interrupt when he arrives. Archie will manage the door. That last part wasn't news, but I still gave him a nod. Around 9:30, the bell rang, short, sharp, and certain. I opened the door halfway, leaving the chain on. Victor Styles stood outside, collar up against the cold, eyes too bright to be sober or calm. Goodwin, he said, you've been expecting me. We've got a habit of that. Come in, slowly. He obeyed, stepping inside with a deliberate precision that told me Saul's bet was right. There was weight in his coat pocket, and it wasn't loose change. I let the door shut behind him and gestured toward the office. When he entered, Camilla rose instinctively, then froze at the look on his face. He didn't even glance at her at first. His eyes went straight to Wolfe, sitting like a carved idol behind the desk. Mr. Wolfe, he said, voice tight, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Wolfe lifted a brow. Your phrasing, Mr. Styles, is unfortunate. I possess many things that do not belong to those who covet them. The orchid, Styles snapped. You know what I mean. Ah. Wolfe's tone was almost gentle. Paphiopedilum aurelia. It arrived here under false pretense. You claim ownership. Styles' gaze flicked to Camilla, then back. My brother bred it. It's all I have left of him. Hargrove stole it, and now he wants to destroy me the way he destroyed Colin. Camilla found her voice. Victor, please. Listen. The notes are gone. Someone broke into the gallery tonight. He turned on her. Gone? Don't lie to me. I'm not. I saw them. They were taken before I could. He took a step closer, eyes narrowing. And you called Wolfe. You always run to someone else to fix things you broke. That's enough, I said, moving between them. You came here to talk to Wolfe. Do that, or get out. He glared, but stopped. Wolfe hadn't moved a muscle. Mr. Styles, he said, you are a man caught between vengeance and confession. Decide which you prefer. I can accommodate either, but not both. Styles' hand twitched toward his pocket. For a second, Camilla gasped. Wolfe's voice, quiet but absolute, cut through it. No, sir. Not here. You would fail even in aim. The hand froze. Then slowly, deliberately, Styles pulled out. Not a gun, but a folded paper, crumpled and smudged. He dropped it on the desk. This, he said, was left under my door this morning. I picked it up and unfolded it. A typed note. You cannot hide what was never yours. The truth blooms tonight. Deliver yourself to the master of orchids, or others will suffer as your brother did. No signature, just the same green wax seal. Aurelia. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. So, the same hand that sent me the orchid. Interesting. Styles leaned forward. That's why I came. I thought it was Hargrove. But now I think it's her. He pointed at Camilla. She recoiled. That's insane. Is it? You were with Hargrove when Colin died? You defended him when I tried to sue. You could have planted this, called me, led me here. Maybe you thought Wolfe would exonerate you. That's not true. Puis, Wolfe said softly, silencing them both. Mr. Styles, you mistake cunning for chaos. Miss Reeve lacks the cold precision this orchestration required. The author of these letters plays on intellect, not emotion. And, he added, leaning forward, you have misjudged your own role. You are not the avenger. You are the pawn. Styles's face went rigid. What are you saying? That the same person who killed your brother now manipulates you to ruin Hargrove, and perhaps to destroy yourself in the process. Your purpose ended the moment the orchid reached my door. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, from the hallway, came a firm knock on the outer door. I met Wolfe's eyes. He gave a slow nod. I went and opened it. Bertram Hargrove stood there, pale and wild-eyed. He pushed past me without invitation, storming into the office. Wolfe, you have to listen to me. Someone's trying to kill me. He froze when he saw Styles. What are you doing here? Styles' laugh was short and bitter. Enjoying the view, apparently. You look terrible, Bertram. Paranoid suits you. I've been followed all evening, Hargrove said, breathing hard. A car shadowed me from the gallery. Good God, what is she doing here? Camilla's voice shook. Trying to survive, apparently. Wolfe exhaled. Through his nose, the sound like an orchestra tuning for doom. Excellent, all three of you, assembled precisely as expected. Mr. Goodwin, please close the door. We are now in possession of every instrument of our discord. I did, and when I turned back, Wolfe's eyes had gone flat and bright. Now, he said, we shall have the truth. Because someone in this room has already murdered once and intends to do so again. No one spoke. The room felt smaller, tighter. Camilla's hand trembled on the arm of her chair. Styles stood rigid, and Hargrove's face gleamed with a fine sheen of sweat. Wolfe waited a beat longer, then added quietly, and the next corpse will not be as obliging as Colin Styles. It wasn't thunder that followed, but the kind of silence that only happens when people realize they're not as innocent as they thought. No one moved. The tension in the office was so thick you could have hung it over the radiator to dry. Wolfe sat perfectly still, eyes half-lidded, his voice slow and exact. Let us dispense with pretenses. Each of you came here because of Aurelia. Each of you believes the others responsible for theft, deceit, or death. And yet the only indisputable fact is that the hybrid now resides in this house, and its journey here has already cost one life. Hargrove's mouth opened, then closed again. He glanced at Styles, then at Camilla, the way a man glances at storm clouds, deciding which one to fear first. You can't possibly mean... Colin's death? That was an accident. Pfui, Wolfe said softly. Accidents are the art of cowards. They provide the comfort of ambiguity. He shifted slightly, the motion barely perceptible. Mr. Styles, I believe you recently discovered that your brother had, before his death, been in possession of records proving your employer's fraud. That discovery inspired you to take matters into your own hands, to retrieve what was his, to expose Hargrove, and perhaps to avenge the rest. Victor Styles' voice was tight. You make it sound like I planned all this. I didn't. I just wanted justice. Justice is a convenient mask for self-pity, Wolfe said. You orchestrated the delivery to me, hoping I would confirm the truth and destroy Hargrove publicly. You even used my reputation as your bludgeon, but you are no murderer. That's damn right, Styles said. And you can prove it? Yes, Wolfe murmured. Because your brother's death predates your courage. Camilla turned toward him, voice unsteady. Then who? Who would kill Colin? The person, Wolfe said, who profited from both brothers, who understood the worth of Aurelia, not as a plant, but as leverage. His gaze flicked to Hargrove. Your gallery, Mr. Hargrove, was near collapse even before Colin's death. Loans unpaid, investors impatient. Then, by convenient tragedy, you retained the one specimen valuable enough to buy you another year of solvency. Hargrove's composure cracked. You think That's absurd. I was devastated when Colin died. Indeed, Wolfe said dryly. Devastation is cheaper than restitution. Hargrove surged to his feet. This is outrageous. You have no evidence. Sit down, Wolfe said, not loudly but with such absolute command that Hargrove did. You misunderstand me. I do not accuse you of killing Colin Styles. You lack the imagination for so clean a solution. No, sir, you merely employed the person who did. That pulled the air out of the room. Camilla gasped. Styles stared. I tightened my stance near the door. Wolfe, unmoved, continued. The culprit is one who knew both brothers intimately, who knew how to gain their trust and yours, who could move freely between them, acquiring the knowledge necessary to forge Colin's records, to sell the lie of your ownership, to misdirect suspicion when the original breeder perished, and who, when the evidence resurfaced tonight, acted again, to silence it. Camilla's voice was a whisper. No. Wolfe turned his head slightly. Yes, Miss Reeve. You. She stood up fast enough to spill her glass. That's not true. Please remain standing, Wolfe said. It clarifies proportion. You came here under the pretense of seeking my help, knowing the orchid had already been sent to me. You sought to control the narrative, to appear as frightened victim rather than the instigator you are. You're insane, she said. Why would I send it to you? Why involve you at all? For credibility, Wolfe said, the perfect irony. By invoking my judgment, you ensured that no one would suspect you. You calculated that I would be occupied by the moral puzzle and not the messenger. You nearly succeeded. Hargrove looked at her, confusion hardening into disbelief. Camilla, you can't. She laughed, but it was brittle. Don't be ridiculous. You think I'd kill Colin? He was my friend. Your lover, Wolfe interrupted, until you realized he would never give you what Hargrove could. Status, money, refinement, so you attached yourself to him instead. When Colin threatened to expose the fraud, you warned Hargrove. He panicked, confronted Colin, and in the struggle, Colin died. You helped him dispose of the evidence and framed it as an accident. Her face had gone white. No, she said softly. Wolfe leaned forward, voice low. But you underestimated guilt. Hargrove's guilt drove him to secrecy. Yours drove you to pride. When Victor began his campaign, you saw a way to end it by engineering a drama, the letter, the orchid, the delivery. You used Victor's grief as a pawn and my reputation as shield. And when your hidden drawer gave you away, you went to the gallery to retrieve the notes, only to find someone already searching. You killed him. The silence that followed was a hammer. Hargrove stammered, "Killed? Who?" "The thief she imagined was Victor," Wolfe said. "But I suspect it was one of your night clerks, or perhaps your assistant. The police will tell us soon enough when they find the body in your greenhouse corridor." Camilla shook her head violently. "No, I didn't. I only pushed. He fell—" She stopped, realizing too late that she'd spoken. Wolfe's tone did not change. "Precisely. He fell as Colin fell. You are consistent, Miss Reeve, if nothing else." Styles was on his feet now, pale but steady. "You used me. All this time—" She turned to him, eyes wide. "Victor, I never meant—" He backed away. "Don't." I stepped in before anyone decided to make Wolfe's carpet more memorable. "That's enough." Wolfe's gaze flicked toward me. "Archie, please inform Inspector Kramer that Miss Reeve has a statement to deliver. You will find the circumstances of the homicide both regrettable and corroborative." Camilla sank into the chair, hands trembling. "I didn't want to kill anyone," she said, barely audible. "I just wanted it to end." Wolfe's expression didn't change. And it has. Hargrove's face was grey. "My God, all this—" "Yes," Wolfe said. "All this to protect a fraud. A beautiful orchid born of deceit, nursed by vanity, and watered with blood. It will be turned over to the authorities as evidence. Perhaps there it will wither appropriately." When the police came 20 minutes later, Camilla went quietly. Hargrove followed, muttering something about lawyers and ruin. Victor lingered at the door long enough to look back at Wolfe and say hoarse, "Thank you for telling it." Wolfe only nodded. When they were gone, he exhaled, long and slow. "Lock the door, Archie." I did. "You sure about the body?" "Certain," he said. The pattern required completion. She would not have left without one more fall. He reached for his beer. "Now, Archie, I require dinner." "After all that?" He lifted the glass. "Appetite, my dear fellow, is the only honest instinct left to man." I didn't argue. Outside, the night pressed close against the glass, and inside, the orchids upstairs breathed quietly, witnesses to another case that had bloomed, withered, and gone still. The brownstone had a way of returning to silence after chaos, like a pond settling after someone throws a stone. Kramer and his men had been gone for over an hour. The doorbell, the shouting, the notebooks, the formalities, they'd all evaporated into the cold November night. What was left was the smell of cigars and damp wool, and the faint hissing of the radiators trying to pretend that human folly hadn't passed through the front hall. Wolfe was back in his chair, leaning a little deeper than usual. He'd gone through 2 bottles of beer without comment, which for him meant fatigue bordering on reflection. I'd made the call to Saul, to settle his fee, told Fritz we wouldn't be needing dinner reheated, and filed the last of the evening's notes under Aurelia. When I finally sat down across from Wolfe, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the wall clock and the city murmuring outside. "You're unusually quiet," I said. "I'm digesting," Wolfe murmured. "Facts or food?" "Both are indigestible tonight." That was a fair call. The cleanup at Hargrove's gallery had confirmed Wolfe's prediction with surgical precision. A young clerk named Lionel Brooke had been found in the greenhouse corridor, dead from a fall that might have been self-inflicted if you believed in clumsy ghosts. The police didn't. The poor kid had apparently interrupted Camilla while she was retrieving Colin Styles' stolen notes. Wolfe had been right. Her story had folded like paper in the rain before Kramer had even lit his first cigar. "You know," I said, "I almost feel sorry for her." "Almost." Wolfe opened one eye. "You will refrain from sentimentality, Archie. Miss Reeve was intelligent, articulate, and utterly without moral ballast. She possessed sufficient acumen to orchestrate deception, yet not enough discipline to preserve it. Pity is wasted on incompetence." "Sure," I said. But you've got to admit, she played a long game. 2 men dead, a gallery gutted, a collector ruined. That's a lot of work just to save face. Face, Wolfe said dryly, is merely the final refuge of vanity. It requires constant repair. She mistook vanity for virtue, a common ailment in both commerce and art. I leaned back, stretching my legs. So what happens to Hargrove? He will suffer the natural consequence of his indulgence: exposure, bankruptcy, and eventually the weary comfort of rationalization. He will tell himself that deceit was necessity, that Camilla's acts were aberration, and that his own weakness was merely misfortune. In short, he will recover. And Victor Styles? Wolfe gave a slight shrug. He will grieve anew. His anger will seek a fresh home. I imagine he will direct it toward Hargrove, perhaps even toward me, though in time he may understand that vengeance is never satisfied. It merely changes appetite. I gave him a look. You're practically philosophical tonight. I am practical, he corrected. Philosophy is only logic with manners. That line earned a smirk from me. And Aurelia, what happens to the golden girl upstairs? He made a small sound that might have been amusement. She will remain until the authorities collect her. It is a pity. She is remarkable. A flower of exquisite breeding and no conscience, much like her custodians. I stood and went to the window. The street lights washed the sidewalk in cold amber. Funny how a single plant can cause so much trouble. It was never the plant, Wolfe said behind me. It was the reflection of self each person saw in it. Hargrove saw prestige. Colin saw genius. Victor saw justice. Camilla saw power. Each desired possession, not comprehension. Which leaves you, I said. What did you see? He was silent long enough that I turned to look. His eyes were on the decanter, unfocused. A specimen, he said finally. And a warning. Beauty without discipline corrupts as surely as ignorance without humility. Nice line, I said. You saving that for Bartlett's? He grunted, which meant don't be insolent. But there was no heat in it. I poured him another beer, then one for myself. You know, I said after a sip. Kramer didn't say it, but I think he was almost impressed. You practically handed him a confession on a silver platter. He will forget by morning, Wolfe said. Gratitude has the lifespan of milk. Maybe. Still, he's got his case tied up. You've got your fee and the Orchids get their beauty sleep. Seems like everybody wins, except the ones who don't. Which is to say, Wolfe murmured. Everyone. We sat in silence for a minute. The kind that isn't uncomfortable, just full. The brownstone has a way of reclaiming peace the way Wolfe reclaims order, slowly, stubbornly, and entirely on its own terms. Finally, he spoke again, softer this time. Archie. Yeah? You may inform Mr. Panzer tomorrow that his discretion, as always, was commendable, and remind him that virtue is not contagious. We shall not expect further excitement this week. I grinned. Meaning you plan to stay glued to the chair for the foreseeable future. My chair, he said, is both fortress and altar. I see no reason to abandon either. Right. And what about me? I assume I can go see a movie without someone slipping me a poisoned ticket? He waved a hand. Your amusements are your own affair, provided they remain outside this house. Got it. I drained the last of the beer. Still, you've got to admit, this one had class. Murder by metaphor. Orchids, vanity, deceit. It's practically literature. Phooey, Wolfe said. Literature is merely gossip preserved. Humanity's appetite for melodrama exceeds its capacity for reflection. We do not grow wiser. We merely cultivate more elaborate excuses. Then why keep solving these things? He regarded me. That slow, measuring look that always lands between insult and affection. Because, Archie, excuses offend me. That was Wolfe's version of a confession. I couldn't top it, so I didn't try. I stood, gathered the empty glasses, and said, "If you need me, I'll be upstairs typing the report. You can call it The Case of the Killer Who Ordered Orchids." He grunted again. A vulgar title. "Sure," I said, "but it'll sell." As I left the office, I glanced back once. Wolfe was staring at the empty air above his desk. Not quite at the wall, not quite at anything. His lips moved faintly, maybe counting the minutes till beer became bedtime, or maybe naming something he'd never admit aloud. Pity, perhaps, for a woman who'd tried to grow beauty out of deceit and ended up choking on both. By the time I reached the landing, the house had gone still again. Upstairs, the orchids were breathing in their damp, perfect world, oblivious to the corpses and confessions beneath them. I sat down at my desk, rolled a fresh sheet into the typewriter, and started the report. Somewhere below, Wolfe's chair creaked, and then silence. It was the kind of silence that comes only after justice, or something like it, has been served. I woke the next morning to the smell of Fritz's coffee and the faint hum of the orchids upstairs. For a place that had hosted a murder confession less than 12 hours ago, the brownstone had resumed its natural rhythm like a cat cleaning its whiskers after a brawl. Wolfe was in the plant rooms, of course. I could hear the soft whir of the fans and Theodore's murmurs as I shaved. By the time I made it down to the office, the breakfast trays were set: ham, soft-boiled eggs, and enough beer to satisfy both a Belgian army and one detective of sedentary habits. Wolfe didn't speak until halfway through his second egg. "Archie," he said, "you neglected to include in last night's report the timing of Miss Reeves' call." 10:43, I said. "I checked the log this morning." He nodded once. "And the call itself lasted 1 minute, 22 seconds. You had Fritz time it? I have a clock and memory." I stirred my coffee. "If you're checking for errors, feel free to mark them in red. But I don't see why the time matters." She was already in a panic. The whole thing could have happened 5 minutes earlier, and it wouldn't change much. He looked up then, and that's always a bad sign. "You are mistaken. Sequence defines causality. Miss Reeve did not panic spontaneously. Something or someone provoked her." "Meaning what? You think someone called her first?" "Precisely." He dabbed his lips with a napkin. "Before she called us, she received another communication, likely a threat. Otherwise, she would not have risked returning to the gallery alone. Vanity would not drive her there. Fear did." I leaned back. "So we've still got a loose end, the mysterious messenger." "Indeed," he said, "a hand unseen yet guiding all motions. It is intolerable." That word intolerable has a special resonance in Wolfe's dictionary. It's 1 notch below unforgivable and 2 above tiresome. When something becomes intolerable, it means he's about to act, even if acting involves no more than issuing orders like a general at a dinner table. He sent me to check with Saul, who'd already been making calls since dawn. By 11, Saul turned up in person, coat dusted with frost and expression grave. Wolfe gestured him to the red leather chair. "I traced the phone line from the gallery," Saul said. "There was an outgoing call to a private number 10 minutes before Miss Reeves. Belonged to a man named Lionel Brooke, the clerk who took the dive." I felt that one in my stomach. "The same guy who interrupted her?" "Looks that way. He'd been calling that number every few days for the past month. Short calls under a minute each." Wolfe's eyes darkened. "To whom?" Saul handed over a slip of paper. "Registered to one Bertram Hargrove." I swore under my breath. "The goal of that man." Wolfe stopped me with a finger. "Not goal. Calculation." He turned the note over thoughtfully. Mr. Brooke, the clerk, was corresponding with Hargrove privately. That suggests complicity, perhaps blackmail. And when Miss Reeve discovered him, she acted not out of panic, but necessity. She could not allow him to speak. Saul said, That fits with what Kramer's men found. The kid had a torn envelope in his pocket. No letter inside, just the flap, with that green wax seal again. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly, like a chess player seeing the final checkmate take shape. So our ghost persists? You think someone else was feeding both of them, Reeve and Brooke? I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. The author of those letters. The architect who set this symphony of deceit in motion. Camilla was a participant, not an originator. She lacked subtlety for orchestration. Then who? Someone who remained invisible yet omnipresent. Someone who stood to gain not money but vindication, and who knew every move before it occurred. He opened his eyes and looked straight at Saul. You will find who purchased that wax seal, green embossed with the word Aurelia. Begin with stationers, private boutiques, and specialized importers. Saul nodded, pocketed the note, and left without a word. When the door closed, I said, You think this isn't over, don't you? I do not think, Wolfe said. I observe. The machinery still runs. The gears do not stop simply because one hand is removed. At 3, Saul called from Midtown. He sounded winded. Found the seal. Custom order. 2 months ago. Paid in cash. The buyer gave a false name, R. Coulson, but the shop clerk remembered the accent. British. Polished. British, I said. None of our suspects had that accent. Saul hesitated. No, but the clerk said the man mentioned he'd just come from a showing at the Hargrove Gallery. I thanked him, hung up, and turned to Wolfe. A British accent, connected to Hargrove's circle. Wolfe's brows drew together like storm clouds. Ah. I waited. He didn't elaborate. Care to share with the class? He leaned back, eyes half closed again. Archie, when Miss Reeve spoke of 2 donors from Zurich at the preview dinner, she was incorrect. They were not Swiss. One of them was English, the critic Nigel Coulson, formerly of The Spectator. A man with a fondness for both orchids and scandal. He vanished yesterday morning. Vanished? His hotel reports he checked out without notice, leaving no forwarding address. Conveniently, his luggage was later reclaimed by courier, paid in cash, naturally. So Coulson's our puppet master, I said. What's his play? Exposure, Wolfe said. Not of crime, but of character. He intended to publish a treatise, The Cult of Deception, The Anatomy of Fraud in Modern Art. Hargrove, the Styles brothers, and Miss Reeve were all subjects in his draft. He required only a climax, a spectacle. He crafted one using human weakness as his medium. I whistled softly. So, all that, the letter, the orchid, the delivery, it was one big composition for his article. Yes, a morality play with fatal consequences. Wolfe sighed. He miscalculated only one detail, that human beings, when manipulated, seldom follow the script. So where is he now? Gone, Wolfe said. He will publish anonymously, perhaps abroad. Kramer will pursue, but to no avail. His victory is already complete. The story will live without him. I looked at him. And you're fine with that? He considered it. The dead cannot be resurrected. The living must bear what they made. I am not the custodian of morality, merely its accountant. Still, I said, it feels unfinished. Everything is unfinished, Wolfe murmured. That is the secret of endurance. He closed his eyes again. The light through the window caught the rim of his glass, glinting gold like a trapped sunbeam. I sat for a while, listening to the faint tick of the clock and the soft, deliberate sound of Wolfe's breathing. Slow, certain, and utterly at peace with the chaos he'd just dismantled. Somewhere above us, the orchids hissed faintly under the misting jets. They didn't know the difference between murder and redemption. They bloomed anyway. The next morning dawned gray and indifferent, the kind of November morning New York specializes in, cold enough to remind you of your sins, dull enough to make you forget them. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when Wolfe summoned me to the office with the kind of gravity usually reserved for coronations and condemnations. He was already in his chair, the yellow robe immaculate, a small stack of correspondence before him, and a single sheet of creamy stationery on top. Fritz had left a vase on the corner of the desk, empty. The orchids upstairs were forbidden to leave their sanctum. This one was for the absent, the dead, the guilty, and perhaps the triumphant. "Good morning, sir," I said. "It is neither good nor bad," Wolfe replied. "Merely morning." "Ah, you've been talking to the weather again." He ignored that. "Archie, you will transcribe this letter for the record. It was delivered not half an hour ago." He passed me the page. The handwriting was neat, elegant, unmistakably foreign. I read it aloud. "To Mr. Nero Wolfe, I'm told the American appetite for truth is as delicate as the Paphiopedilum itself, thriving best when shaded from direct light. You have served admirably as both shade and steward. The specimen you received was never mine, nor yours, but humanity's, an emblem of our incurable fascination with beauty purchased through deceit. I leave it in your care as proof that perfection demands corruption. Should you ever find yourself in London, do visit the conservatory at Kew. Ask for the Aurelia room. You may find the blooms familiar. Your obedient servant, N.C." I lowered the paper. Well, I'll be damned. Nigel Coulson writes from the fog, and apparently he's been watching the score from the balcony. Wolfe's expression didn't shift. He has style. I concede him that. So he gets away with it. Or rather, he never left. "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "But guilt and genius share a long tether. He will not escape the weight of either." I took a seat. "You're not going to tell Kramer." What purpose would that serve? Kramer would bluster, demand evidence I cannot supply, and in the end, Coulson would vanish again. The law prefers closure. I prefer comprehension. They are rarely the same. "That's convenient for you." He regarded me. "It is convenient for the truth. The deaths of Colin Stiles and Lionel Brooke were the consequence of vanity. Coulson merely composed the conditions. He revealed the rot beneath their polish, and like all who fancy themselves gods, he forgot that creation and destruction are the same act when performed without conscience." I whistled softly. "You sound almost sorry for him." "Not at all, but I acknowledge his artistry. A crime without profit is still a monument to folly." He leaned back, eyes half closed. "The orchid upstairs will remain here until it dies naturally. It is too beautiful to destroy, too corrupted to share." "Symbolic," I said. "You're keeping the evidence as a sermon." "As a specimen," Wolfe corrected. "A lesson is implied, not preached." Fritz entered with the morning mail and paused, sensing the mood. Wolfe waved him off with a curt nod. I folded the letter, slid it into a folder marked Aurelia, and closed the drawer. "Well," I said, "that wraps it up. A dead botanist, a fallen clerk, one ruined gallery, and a critic with delusions of divine authorship? A full set." "You omitted Miss Reeve," Wolfe said quietly. "Right. She gets a line of her own. A woman who mistook love for leverage." "Indeed." Wolfe reached for his beer, poured it with slow precision, and stared at the foam. "It is a curious thing, Archie. The human tendency to cultivate ruin with the same care one gives to flowers. We prune, water, and guard it until it blooms, into tragedy. Then we call it fate." "That's dark," I said. "Even for you." "Observation, not melancholy. The difference is critical." "Sure," I said. "Still, if you ever want to write poetry, I know a magazine that might pay for this stuff." "Pfui," he said. "I'm not a sentimentalist." "Could have fooled me. You kept the orchid." He almost smiled. "Almost. A reminder, not a relic. One must sometimes preserve ugliness to recognize beauty." I nodded toward the door. "So what now? Back to the orchids, or Do we finally let the brownstone breathe again? The orchids first, he said. They are less troublesome than people. I got up, straightened my tie. I'll call Saul, tell him the curtain's down. Maybe take the afternoon off. See that you do, Wolfe said. You have earned your leisure. And Archie, yeah? If you ever receive another anonymous flower, burn it. That got a laugh out of me. Yes, sir. I'll try not to let beauty kill me. I left him there with his beer and the folded letter, both perfectly balanced on his desk. The house was still again, the kind of silence that follows not peace but completion. Upstairs, the orchids hissed under the warm mist, oblivious to the moral weight their kind had carried. By the time I reached the door, I could hear Wolfe's chair creak, the sound of a man retreating into thought. Outside, the air was sharp, the city impatient as ever. I lit a cigarette and looked back once at the brownstone, thinking of Aurelia, of Camilla, of the critic who wrote his masterpiece in blood and vanished into applause. Wolfe would never call it poetry, but it was, in its way. And like all poetry worth reading, it left a bruise you couldn't quite explain,